you are not who you think you are. Hear me out on this. And what I want to talk to you about is your identity, because your identity determines who you are, or at least who you think you are. And your identity also determines your outcome, right? Because if you think you're a loser, if you think you're a deadbeat, if you think that you're someone not worthy, if you think that you are lesser than everyone else, then you are going to manifest that life. Don't you think so? And so a lot of my teachings that I do when I do keynote speeches everywhere is either about money and self-mastery or developing the right identity. Because most of us, and I remember when I did this, I carried a false identity. And what is your false identity? Well, odds are things have happened to you. You know, you've been traumatized, you've been abused, you've been beat up. Maybe like me, you were sexually abused. Maybe you came to this country as a foreigner like I did. Maybe you were involved in less than legal stuff like I was as a young man. And so you created this false identity like you are lower and lesser and undeserving of love and abundance, right? And I don't know if you know this or not, but when you put on a false identity, in other words, when you have this false perception of yourself, you begin to find evidence to reinforce that perception, right? I'll give you a great example. A good friend of mine, many years ago, decades ago, his name is Torrance. We went to junior high and high school together. He's a black dude, and he was like, man, everyone's racist. Everyone's racist. And I was like, dude, you know, we hang out all the time, and I don't see a lot of racist people around right now. Like, we're in Southern California. It's not like we're in the South. It's the 90s, and I certainly understand there's racism. I certainly experienced it myself coming to this country, right? People telling me to go back to my own country. You don't belong here. You guys are stealing all the great jobs that us Americans need to have, etc., whatever. Like, I understand there's that. And I understand there's racism against blacks or against whatever nationality. But when I met his dad, who had truly experienced racism, having come from the South and moving into California, I realized that even though California is a melting pot, and it's not lost on me that there's racism everywhere still, that he had developed that false identity. My friend Torrance had developed that false identity that racism is everywhere. And so when we'd go through the lunch line, or we'd go to the beach together, or we end up getting pulled over by the cops, and I'm in the car with him, and like he's like, see, that was racist. I was like, nah, bro, they were just like upset at us because we're like young kids being jackasses, right? But it was a false identity. Only years later, it's funny, I got a message from him saying like, dude, you were absolutely right about that. And here's the deal, like that was when I started to, when I say young kids, like we were in our 20s at that point, because after high school we kept in contact, etc. But as I started to develop and realize that no, there is a such thing as our false identity that we carry, and then we begin to look for evidence. And that's the problem, right? When you think that someone is out to get you, you will find people hiding in bushes, or you will find something suspicious, or you will carry extra paranoia with you. And if you're like, hey, the world is safe and everything's fine, then you will carry yourself accordingly, right? So with that said, let's talk about your identity and how to shed your false identity, because it is your identity, your false identity that you're carrying right now that is limiting your growth, your happiness, your potential, your ability to earn, your ability to have the relationship that you want, to have the health and fitness and really self-development that you're looking for in life. So let's get going. Where does the false identity come from, right? Typically comes from the story that you've either told yourself, experienced, or have been told, right? In my friend Torrance's case, he was told a story of true racist experiences that his father had experienced, right? Like racist events that his father had experienced. And because of that, he was like, dude, you know, racism is like alive and well, and it's like everywhere, and it's here in Southern California. And I'm like, no, I don't know, bro, not to that extent that your dad experienced maybe in the 70s and 60s, and maybe not to the extent that it took place in the South, right? And again, no, I'm not attacking anyone there in the South. I realize like things have changed, and so don't be DMing me and sending me a message about how the South has reformed itself. Like, I get it, like whatever. The story here that I want to share with you is that when you have told yourself a false story, when you have experienced abuse or trauma or something that has created a false story, and you start believing this story, what happens next is the story that you told yourself over and over again, and the story that you tell others of what happened to you, begins to develop your belief system that I'm not liked, I'm not loved, I'm not deserving, I'm not worthy. That's a story I had told myself. And growing up, I continued to feel that way and reinforce that story. Well, that story then created a belief system in me, right? The belief system was that I shouldn't try so hard, that I shouldn't try and be seen and heard, that I don't deserve abundance, wealth, opportunity, that I'm not that smart, that great things aren't meant for me. When your beliefs are molded by your stories, the next thing that happens is your identity is created. And in my case, a false identity was created that, well, I'm just not that smart. I'm not a lovable, worthy dude. And therefore, I started to find evidence in the world of that. When someone interacted with me in a way that I felt like wasn't exactly how I expected, I would go, see, they probably think I'm a piece of shit. They probably think that I'm not worthy of respect, of abundance, of love, of being heard or understood. And they're acting this way. And so that evidence reinforced the false identity that I carried. End up limiting your growth. You start putting these limitations and boundaries on your self-worth and your capabilities, right? And remember, this journey of life, you only get one round at it. Like, you only get one chance on this planet. And if you are letting the things that happen to you dictate and mold your story, then what you're really doing is you're limiting and creating boundaries of how much you can achieve, of how much you are worth in terms of self-worth, of how capable you are. And if you're like, well, I'm not capable of much, well, then you're not going to be deserving much. Not much of love, not much of happiness, not much of financial freedom, not much of relational, like joy, right? Like, you'll never feel like you fully deserve anything. And that's what was going on with me. And once you start feeling that way, then you start living that way. Well, it's like, hey, if I'm not worthy anyway and I'm just a piece of shit, I might as well go out there and do piece of shit stuff. Or if I'm seen as lazy, if I'm seen as someone who is unworthy of success, I might as well not try. Well, then you end up literally manifesting the false identity that you put on yourself. And so you're probably wondering, like, all right, so what do I do? Well, first off, understand that formula. The story that you tell yourself ends up creating your belief systems, right? Your belief systems end up molding your identity of who you are. Your identity then makes you look for evidence in the world to reinforce what has happened to you. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? As you look for evidence in the world to reinforce what happened, well, what are you trying to reinforce? The story, which then reinforces the negative belief systems that you have about yourself. Remember, those negative belief systems are limitations and boundaries put on your self-worth and your capabilities. And then now, again, we reinforce the whole shitty identity. And that leads you to more evidence finding. And so if you want to fix this, you have to stop telling yourself this false story, because the story that you tell yourself really determines who you become. And I always look at it this way, like, the story could have been told to you by someone else, maybe your parents, right? Maybe they come from abuse. Maybe they come from neglect. Maybe they had issues with alcohol. Maybe they were made to feel unworthy, unlovable, undeserving. And so maybe they pass that story along to you that, hey, we are unloving, unworthy. And maybe don't pass it along saying those words. Remember, actions really determine a lot of the outcome, right? You all of a sudden, they're still telling you a story that you're unworthy. No matter how much you try, you're unworthy. And soon you start building that belief system that you're unworthy. And soon you start feeling like you're unworthy. That becomes your identity. And then soon you find evidence in the world, and you find people in the world who are going to treat you negligently, right? And you're like, see, I married someone and like they make me feel like I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. Well, like, you went and found that person. Maybe not consciously, subconsciously, you went and found that person. And so how do we fix this? Well, the easiest solution to fix this is to understand that the story is nothing more than a pen. The story was written, and therefore the belief systems were established, negative, and therefore the false identity was created, and therefore you go through life looking for evidence to reinforce that false identity, and take that pen back and start writing the new story. Like, what if tomorrow you decide that I'm going to do everything that someone with the identity of abundance, deserving of abundance, success, happiness, great health, abs, jacked, right? I'm going to write the story of someone who just deserves absolutely everything. All right, what does that story look like? What does that man or woman look like? Well, the story of that person is that they wake up early, they have a set routine that they follow that sets them up to win. Right? I've shared my morning routine with you. Like, I feel that as long as I stick to the habits of a winner, and in my mind, a winner is someone who is physically jacked, mentally and emotionally strong, says what he means and means what he says, is congruent with his or her core values and the direction and the path they're going in life, and is a role model to their kids, to their family, to their community, to the people they work with. Like, I want to see myself as that person. That's the story I've rewritten for myself. Well, then what are my new beliefs? That I have the belief system that I need to wake up early, drink my 30 ounces of water, send out gratitude text messages, like do something good instead of screen sucking off social media. Send out 3 gratitude text messages, right? Listen to Jack Johnson's music because he makes me happy and makes me feel good about myself while I'm showering. Go downstairs and do productive work in terms of writing a blog post or going through my email content or outlining my next book or outlining the shows for the BK show, right? Like, that's what a productive, successful, worthy human does, because they see the world as abundance and opportunity, and they believe their self-worth is 100 out of 100. I believe my capabilities are 100 out of 100. I used to not believe that, but I believe that now to the deepest fucking bone marrow, right? And because of that, my identity is that I am lovable, I am worthy, I am deserving of health, happiness, abundance, a great relationship, all of it. And guess what? By habitually living that life, by then constructing the habits that guy who now rewrote that news story has. The habits are to wake up early, to drink the water, send out gratitude text messages, listen to happy music, right? Eat a high protein meal in the morning, go and crush my workout, get sunlight 3 miles in the park, walking and getting sunlight on my skin and being in my own thoughts and having a conversation with self and really processing who I am, killing my ego on a daily basis, living a humble life, but aggressively getting after it. And as my friend Ed Milet says, constantly being blissfully dissatisfied, right? I'm happy, but I'm constantly striving for more. I'm not quite satisfied with life. And I want to die being blissfully dissatisfied because I want to keep earning, keep doing, keep serving, keep changing lives, keep transforming, keep being a fucking role model for you, for my kids, for the people who look up to me. And by doing that, I stay true to the story that I've rewritten for myself. My beliefs, which are now my new habits, lead me to creating that new identity. And wouldn't you know it, this new identity that I've had the last 15, 16, 17, 20 years or so, this new identity forces me to find evidence in the world that I'm a badass motherfucker.